Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Does Lily's questioning of Holden about Kane reveal her feelings for her ex? In order to find out what Kane Ashby has planned for Genoa City, Lily Winters will begin questioning everyone in the area. Even though she says she has no interest in him, she makes a point of interfering in his affairs. Lily is motivated to learn more about Kane. She was employed by Victor Newman to learn about his intentions and persuade him to abandon his takeover plans. Lily accepted to work with Victor even though she doesn't trust him too much. In order to preserve his relationship with his kids, Lily must now act quickly to persuade Kane to abandon his takeover aspirations. Holden Novak is grilled by Lily Winters. According to previews on The Young and the Restless, Lily will track out Holden Novak to find out how he is related to Kane. Although she doesn't have any evidence, she suspects that he collaborates closely with Kane. Holden won't acknowledge his relationship with Kane. He informs Lily that although he was friendly with Kane, they did not collaborate on business. He is not believed by Lily. She thinks that Holden and Kane are partners in business. She believes that although Kane is trying to keep his hands clean, Holden is doing his dirty work. She feels disgusted by the entire situation and wonders if she can use any of the advice Kane has given her since coming back from France. Lily challenges Holden and won't accept any of his responses. She thinks Kane is lying to her, therefore she wants the truth. Until she learns the truth, she cannot let her guard down around him. Holden says he told her everything he knew, but he still won't come clean. Lily Winters shares her true thoughts about Kane Ashby. According to teasers for The Young and the Restless, Kane will tell Lily that he would sacrifice anything for her and their kids. Without his family, all of this money is nothing. Lily is moved. She makes an unsuccessful attempt to act as though she had no feelings for Kane. She finds it difficult to disentangle her affections from the fact that they have a shared past, which she cannot deny. Naturally, she acts as though she doesn't like Kane and won't tell him how she feels. On the inside, though, Lily finds it difficult to control her developing feelings for Kane. Lily Winters had always prided herself on her ability to stay poised and logical in the face of chaos, but in recent weeks, her thoughts had become consumed with Kane Ashby in ways she refused to admit even to herself, and as much as she told friends and colleagues that her only interest in Kane revolved around his mysterious business maneuvers and his sudden return from France with grand plans for Genoa City, deep down she knew that her insistence on prying into every corner of his life spoke less of professional curiosity and more of lingering personal ties she could never completely sever, which became all too evident when she arranged a quiet yet tense meeting with Holden Novak. The man she suspected was Kane's closest associate and the one person who could provide her with clarity. But before that confrontation even began, Lily replayed in her mind the long, complicated history she shared with Kane, the betrayals, the reconciliations, the painful choices they made for their children, and the undeniable chemistry that seemed to reignite every time they locked eyes, no matter how much she swore she was over him. And with Victor Newman pressing her to dig up information that could dismantle Kane's rumored takeover plans, Lily found herself in a moral and emotional tug-of-war, caught between loyalty to her family, duty to Victor who dangled influence and power in front of her, and her own heart which still ached whenever Kane's name was mentioned. So when she cornered Holden at society, her words came out sharper than intended, her tone blending suspicion with something softer, almost pleading, as she demanded to know what his connection to Kane really was. But Holden, ever the calculating opportunist, only leaned back in his chair and gave a half-smile, insisting he was nothing more than a casual acquaintance, someone who admired Kane's resilience but had no official dealings with him. And though his words sounded smooth, Lily felt her gut tighten with disbelief, convinced that Holden was minimizing his role because Kane had orchestrated it that way, a strategy to keep himself insulated from blame while others got their hands dirty. And as she pushed harder, reminding Holden that she had known Kane long enough to recognize when something didn't add up, she realized her interrogation carried more emotion than professionalism, almost as if she were trying to protect Kane by exposing his supposed allies before Victor could, an irony that wasn't lost on her as Holden raised an eyebrow and asked why she seemed to care so much, a question that left Lily momentarily flustered, because the truth she was burying was that she cared because Kane still mattered to her, and no amount of denial could change that. even if she framed it as concern for her children or a mission to secure Chancellor Winters from hostile schemes. Holden, sensing her discomfort, pressed further, suggesting that maybe her drive to uncover Kane's agenda had less to do with corporate strategy and more to do with the unresolved bond between them. And though Lily quickly deflected by accusing Holden of projecting, her heart thumped in her chest with guilty recognition, because he had unknowingly voiced the truth she was fighting so hard to suppress, that each time she said Kane is lying or Kane is manipulating, what she really meant was Kane is still inside my head, still in my heart, and I don't know how to shake him free. So she doubled down, refusing to accept Holden's evasions, warning him that his association with Kane, whatever form it took, would eventually come to light. Yet beneath the surface, she hated herself for caring whether Kane succeeded or failed, because the thought of him burning out alone without her stung almost as much as the fear that he might win big without her at his side. Holden, finally tiring of the back and forth, claimed once again that there was nothing more to reveal, but Lily's instincts told her otherwise, and though she ended the conversation by vowing to keep digging, she left society more unsettled than before, because in her private thoughts, she replayed Kane's most recent words to her, words that had cut through her defenses like glass. None of this matters without you and the kids, Lil. I'd give it all up in a heartbeat if it meant having my family back. And though she had dismissed him in the moment, pretending his declaration was another manipulative ploy, the sincerity in his eyes haunted her even now, forcing her to admit that she longed for the version of Kane who loved her fiercely, who made her laugh, who fought for them as a unit, and that longing complicated everything, turning her mission against him into a dangerous emotional spiral, because every time she asked someone about his dealings, she wasn't just gathering intel for Victor. She was really searching for pieces of Kane himself, for reassurance that the man she once trusted with her heart hadn't completely disappeared beneath the ruthless strategist he was now pretending to be. And as she drove home that night, Lily whispered to herself that she didn't love him anymore, repeating it like a mantra, but the tears welling in her eyes betrayed her, because deep down she knew that her relentless pursuit of the truth about Kane Ashby wasn't about saving Genoa City or even about protecting Chancellor Winters. It was about protecting her own heart from breaking all over again. And no matter how hard she fought, her questioning of Holden had revealed more than she intended, exposing not only Kane's secrets but her own unshakable feelings for the man who would forever be her greatest weakness. The morning after her tense encounter with Holden Novak, Lily Winters woke up restless, her mind already replaying every sentence exchanged over wine and suspicion at society, each of Holden's smirks and evasive responses gnawing at her. Because even though she had cornered him and pushed him against the wall with her relentless questions, she hadn't gotten what she needed, and that failure unsettled her more than she wanted to admit, not just because it left Victor Newman's request hanging over her like a storm cloud, but because it also meant she was no closer to understanding Kane's true motives, and if she was honest, no closer to understanding her own. She told herself again that this was business, nothing more, that she was simply protecting Chancellor Winters and her children's future. Yet her heart betrayed her, racing every time she thought of Kane's face, the way he'd looked at her the last time they spoke with that quiet intensity that made her feel as though the whole world fell away and nothing existed but the two of them, and she hated that he still had that power over her, hated that her pulse quickened when she should have felt nothing. But no matter how she tried to bury the truth, her actions told another story. Because when she scheduled a follow-up meeting with Holden under the pretense of clarifying details about his friendship with Kane, she already knew she wasn't chasing facts. She was chasing reassurance, chasing some thread that would explain why Kane was back, why he was moving like a shadow in Genoa City, and whether deep inside he still carried even a flicker of the love he once swore would never die. Holden, sharp enough to see through her mask, arrived at their meeting with a bemused expression, clearly prepared for her questions, and when Lily once again pressed him, pointing out inconsistencies in his story about knowing Kane casually, he leaned forward this time, lowering his voice, and asked her point-blank why she cared so much, because if she truly believed Kane was a liar and a schemer, why hadn't she walked away and left him to his fate? And though Lily tried to fire back with a quick response about protecting her family and her company, her voice faltered, betraying the truth that hovered on the edge of her tongue, that she cared because part of her still loved him, because part of her always would, and Holden's eyes softened briefly as if he'd uncovered her secret, though he quickly masked it with another sly grin, saying that Kane had warned him Lily might come sniffing around, and that if she wanted to understand Kane's plans, she'd have to accept that he wasn't the man she remembered. But the very suggestion that Kane had spoken of her unsettled her even more, because it meant she was still on his mind, just as he was on hers, and she clung to that fragile connection even as she told herself it meant nothing. Later, alone in her office at Chancellor Winter's, Lily pulled out old photographs she kept hidden in a drawer, images of her and Kane with the kids, smiling, carefree, their arms around each other in a way that made it seem as though nothing could ever break them. And as she stared at those frozen memories, she asked herself why she was really digging into Kane's alliances. Was it to expose him, or was it to remind herself of the man he used to be, to see if that man still existed beneath the hardened exterior? And the truth that terrified her most was that it was both, that she wanted to protect herself from him and yet also find a reason to forgive him, because despite everything, a part of her still longed for the possibility of a second chance. Meanwhile, Kane himself was restless, confiding to no one but Holden that seeing Lily again had awakened something in him he thought he'd buried in France, admitting that all his ambitions and schemes meant little if she stood against him, and Holden, ever the pragmatist, warned Kane that Lily's questioning was dangerous, that her ties to Victor made her a threat, but Kane only shook his head and said softly, "She's not my enemy, Holden, she never could be." Words that revealed the depth of his feelings even as he pursued a ruthless plan. And when Lily learned later from a third party that Kane had spoken of her in such a way, she found herself touched in spite of herself, struggling to reconcile the ruthless businessman she was supposed to be dismantling with the man who once cradled her hand during childbirth and whispered promises of forever. And so the cycle repeated itself, Lily grilling Holden for scraps of truth, Holden deflecting but letting just enough slip to keep her hope alive, and Lily lying awake at night questioning not Kane's loyalty but her own, because in her heart she knew that every time she said she was doing this for Victor or Chancellor Winters, she was really doing it for herself, for that secret part of her that wanted Kane to prove he was still worthy of her love. And though she tried to bury those feelings beneath layers of professionalism and denial, her determination to keep pressing Holden, to chase every lead, and to understand every detail of Kane's return revealed more than she intended, exposing that the woman who claimed to want nothing from her ex-husband was still tethered to him in ways she could never cut loose, and perhaps never truly wanted to. By the end of the week, Lily Winters realized she could no longer hide behind the convenient excuse that she was only following Victor Newman's orders, because every step she took to dig into Kane Ashby's motives only seemed to pull her deeper into his orbit, as though fate were conspiring to remind her that unfinished business between them would never stay buried. And after yet another unproductive meeting with Holden Novak, who, despite his polished evasions, continued to slip Kane's name into conversation with an undertone that hinted at more knowledge than he admitted, Lily found herself staring across the Grand Phoenix lobby one evening, watching Kane check in for a meeting with a quiet intensity that left her breathless. It wasn't just the tailored suit or the air of quiet confidence he carried but the way he looked up at her with those eyes that once saw every corner of her soul. And though she quickly turned away, pretending to study her phone, she couldn't stop the rush of memories that came flooding back. Late nights in their old home filled with laughter and whispered promises, the warmth of his arms after a fight resolved, even the heartbreaks that somehow had made their reunions more powerful, and as much as she wanted to suppress it, that undeniable chemistry tugged at her heart, forcing her to admit to herself what Holden had already suggested, that her relentless pursuit of Kane's truth was less about protecting Chancellor Winters and more about protecting her own fragile hope that the man she once loved still existed. When Kane eventually approached her table, sliding into the seat opposite with the easy confidence of a man who knew he was both unwelcome and irresistible, Lily felt her guard shoot up, but her voice betrayed her by trembling slightly as she asked what he wanted, and Kane, with that half-smile she remembered all too well, told her that he knew she'd been questioning Holden, knew she was digging into his life again, and wanted to understand why. Was it really because Victor Newman had pulled her into his schemes, or was it because she still cared? Because no matter how many walls she built, she couldn't stay away, and though Lily tried to deny it, accusing him of arrogance and manipulation, her flushed cheeks and quickened breath told another story, and Kane, sensing her conflict, leaned forward and whispered that nothing he was building in Genoa City mattered more than the chance to prove to her that he could be better, that the mistakes of their past didn't have to define their future, words that left Lily shaken because she wanted so desperately to believe him even as her mind screamed not to. And later, alone in her office, She admitted to herself with painful honesty that her interrogation of Holden had been a way to keep Kane close without admitting it, a way to stay tethered to him under the guise of duty, and now, with Kane confronting her directly, she could no longer hide from the truth. That her heart still beat for him, no matter how much she insisted otherwise. That night, as Lily Winters sat in her penthouse with a glass of wine untouched in her hand, the confrontation with Kane replayed over and over in her mind, each word he'd spoken echoing louder than the one before, until she could no longer tell whether she was furious at him for cornering her with the truth or furious at herself for letting her composure crack in front of him. Because when Kane leaned in at the Grand Phoenix and told her that nothing mattered more than proving he could still be the man she once believed in, she had felt the old ache resurface, that familiar pull in her chest she had worked so hard to bury. And though she told herself that her anger was righteous, that his schemes were still dangerous and his alliances with men like Holden Novak would eventually unravel into chaos, the truth was her anger burned brightest at the realization that she still wanted to believe him, still longed for the version of Kane who had loved her unconditionally, and that longing made her weak, so weak that she found herself dialing Holden's number again under the pretense of demanding answers about Kane's takeover plans, but really because she needed to hear something, anything, that would either prove Kane beyond redemption or give her permission to hope. Holden, sly as always, answered with a drawl, teasing her about being obsessed with Kane, which only made Lily snap back that she was simply trying to protect her family and her company. But Holden pressed further, suggesting that maybe her real fear wasn't about what Kane was planning but about how easily he could still get under her skin, and the words stung because they rang true. And though Lily threatened to cut him off if he didn't start being honest, Holden only chuckled and told her that Kane's plans were his own and no one else's, that Kane wasn't using him as a front but rather relying on him as a confidant, which left Lily even more conflicted, because if Kane truly trusted Holden, it meant Holden knew a side of him she no longer did, and that thought filled her with jealousy she couldn't admit aloud. Later, as she lay awake in bed, Lily realized her repeated questioning of Holden wasn't about uncovering business secrets but about chasing fragments of the man she had lost, about piecing together some picture of who Kane was now, because she couldn't bring herself to ask Kane directly without exposing her heart, and the more she denied her feelings, the more obvious they became, to herself, to Holden, and perhaps most dangerously, to Kane himself, who had seen the flicker of emotion in her eyes at the Phoenix and would not forget it. And as she finally drifted into a restless sleep, Lily admitted, in the privacy of her own thoughts what she would never dare say aloud, that despite her best efforts to bury the past, her relentless pursuit of Kane's truth had already revealed her own. She still loved him, and the line between protecting Genoa City and protecting her heart had become so blurred that she no longer knew which side she was really fighting for. The following afternoon, Lily Winters tried to bury herself in work at Chancellor Winters, shuffling through reports and drafting emails with a precision that bordered on obsessive, but no matter how many tasks she completed, she couldn't shake the lingering weight of Kane's words, nor the mocking lilt in Holden's voice when he accused her of being obsessed, because deep down she feared they were both right, and the harder she tried to convince herself otherwise, the more transparent her behavior became, so much so that Devon raised an eyebrow during a meeting and asked if everything was all right, forcing Lily to smile tightly and brush it off as stress, when in truth the stress was Kane, always Kane. And later, when she caught herself staring out the window and imagining him walking into the building the way he used to, smiling, ready to charm her into forgiveness, she realized that she was caught in a loop of questions that had less to do with his supposed takeover plans and more to do with her inability to let go. And so, almost against her will, she found herself calling Holden yet again, demanding to know whether Kane's schemes would hurt Chancellor Winters, but Holden only sighed, telling her that Kane's ambitions weren't about destruction, they were about proving something, to himself, to the city, and maybe most of all, to her, which left Lily shaken because if that was true, then every move Kane made was intertwined with her, every plan colored by the shadow of their shared past. And as she hung up the phone, her heart pounded with the realization that her relentless questioning wasn't uncovering anything new about Kane but was instead unmasking herself, peeling back layers she had hidden even from Devon and Victor, exposing a woman who still loved her ex-husband despite every reason not to. And that night, when Kane appeared outside Chancellor Winters waiting for her, leaning casually against his car as though he belonged there, Lily's breath caught, because she knew this wasn't a coincidence. He had felt her pursuit, sensed her doubt, And now he had come to force her to face what she'd been avoiding. And though every instinct told her to walk away, her feet carried her forward, straight toward him, where the heat of unresolved feelings burned hotter than any business war could ever ignite.